Hi, I'm Indra, and I'd like to welcome you to the Messy Middle Matters, where my friends and I explore all the twists, turns, and challenges that arise in the messy middle of work. Welcome back to the Messy Middle Matters. Today, I'm going to be talking about AI. For me, AI isn't about cheating. For me, it's a mirror, right? And lately, I've been watching people make broad generalizations, mistaking heuristics for the truth, confusing style with intent, and treating ambiguity as a threat instead of a potential feature. Which makes me think, are we talking about AI at all? Some people are panicking, and I totally understand that because AI is threatening some jobs. And, it is having an impact on our planet. Others call it cheating. Their favorite phrase is AI slop. Nails on a chalkboard for me when they say that, to be honest. And others treat it like a novelty, confusing the party tricks that it can do with progress and calling it innovation. And, for me, it's none of those. I use AI unapologetically. And if my OpenAI 2025 recap is right, I use it differently than most people use it. I don't use it to take shortcuts to separate me from my thinking or my work. I use it to make my work more accessible, to make it more impactful, and if you can actually believe it, to make it more human-centered. So let's talk about accessibility. I want to be really, really clear. I'm not talking about the really important, deep, life-changing accessibility work where people are doing serious heavy lifting, serious invisible labor to make meaningful changes in the lives of so many. That work deserves its own spotlight, its own standards, and I am not the person who can speak to that. But just the same way that curb cuts have helped so many of us along the way, there's so much work that's being done in that accessibility world that helps us in these small ways, sometimes invisible ways. For example, one of the things that have been committed to from the start is making sure that every one of my episodes that goes out for the Messy Middle Matters it has a transcript attached to it. Fancy file name, SRT files. I would not be able to generate, even if I sat there and typed all the words myself and listened to the episode and made sure I got everything right in the typing. I can't generate an SRT file on my own. I need software for that. And thanks to AI, I don't need to sit there and type everything. And I'm able to generate that SRT file so that folks who are consuming the episodes, no matter what platform they're looking at it or listening to it from, rather, they can take advantage of that if they want to, whether that is to help them with auditory processing or if they themselves are trying to do a little bit of research on making sure that they got the clip for whatever they want to save words away, because heaven knows I'm a quote queen. I love collecting words. They might be one of those people, and that might help them out. I also make sure that the clips and the videos that I have all have open captions. Same reason. Heaven knows that I'm also, one more thing that I'm working on is making sure that I enunciate more clearly. And I'm a clearer communicator overall. And these tools, when I swallow some of my words, make sure that a lot of those are really available to all. Does it get it perfectly? No. But I like to think that it's far better than if I had nothing at all. But for me, it's not, I don't just use AI for the outputs like what I was just talking about. I also use it to amplify my thinking and work through things for myself and for others. Because one of the things that I'm committed to is trying to do my part to make the world a little bit better through the work that I do. For me, AI is a thinking partner. A lot of the stuff that you do when you are a solopreneur, sometimes you do have collaborators, but a lot of times you're thinking through things by yourself. And if there's one thing that I learned along the way is that I do better work when I'm in community. And I also do better work when I focus on my strengths and don't try and play outside of those strengths and try and do things that I'm really, really not well suited for. A lesson learned many, many moons ago
through the book tool Clifton Strengths Finder is that sometimes it's better to strengthen your strengths than it is to try and strengthen your weaknesses. Sometimes it's better to find yourself a partner that's really good at the things that you're not good at and bring them in. So, an example for me, I am a systems thinker. It's a label I've only recently leaned into. Um, but in that systems thinking, when I'm imagining a scenario, I can see it in so many different dimensions and in a now, next, later. That is, I always say it's one of my occupational hazards that I have. Um, but the challenge that happens with that is that when you can see so many different dimensions and when you can see so many different facets and you can see so many different elements to it, sometimes it's hard to distill that into something that somebody can wrap their head around in just a few minutes. They don't need the full picture. They don't need all those pieces of the puzzle. And for me, some of what I work with AI is figuring out, how do I compress those thoughts? How do I pull them together so that others can benefit from my thinking? And then I can in turn then benefit from theirs and their reactions. You know, I said earlier, for me, AI is a mirror. It mirrors back to me what I've put into it. It mirrors back to me how I've trained it. I've spent years training that thing. And I'm grateful to it because it does help me see my work from a different perspective, from an outsider's perspective. And that it's not taking that to, it never does my thinking for me, but it looks at me, like looks at my work from a different point of view. And for that, I am eternally grateful right now for that. It's helping me grow because the reality of it is that, you know, we only know the things that we've been exposed to. And there are so many things that, I mean, I will say this world was not designed for me. It was not built for me in so many ways. But the reality of it is that that's the world that I live in. And because the world was not built for me, I don't understand the why of how things were structured. I understand some of it, but not all of it. And some of these institutional norms and patterns are just not familiar to me. And I work with AI to help understand how I can map my thinking, my way of being in the world to not conform to it. Because heaven knows I've tried to do that in my life and that has not worked out well. But as Francis Fry would say, it gives me the secret memos and helps me understand how I can align with, work with, um, mesh with, or, react against potentially how the world was shaped. For me, I think of AI as a sparring partner a little bit, as a training ground. Since I've been working with it, I will say that my work has gotten sharper. My thinking has gotten clearer. It's not to say I would have gotten there eventually, but I've spent so much of my life thinking through things on my own that I have so many developed muscles. What it does is it allows me, proverbial muscles, yes, the literal ones, but put those to the side. But I've got those proverbial muscles so well developed, it's helped me figure out how I can leverage them to the maximum impact. And yes, I could stumble through that on my own, but I get through that a lot more quickly because I have AI to work with to think through that. And so for me, it's a lot of different things, but that training, as I noted before, is because the world wasn't built for me. There's a lot of people who are choosing to opt out of AI and they're like, oh, that thing, as I said earlier, it's taking away jobs, it's changing the planet, it's doing all these things, and we can talk about all of that. I'm not taking any of that away. But the reality of it is that AI is here to stay, whether we like it or not. And it's our choice to either engage with it or to, reject it and step away. Way back when I remember when computers started being a thing, when we got our email addresses for the first time when I was in college. Yes, I'm dating myself. I was so resistant to it. And I see what that did when I did that. It took me out of the conversation. It took me out of shaping the future, right? For me, engaging with AI is really important because it is shaping the world that we're in. And I want to understand its lexicon. I want to understand how it's working. I want to understand how it's impacting things. And I also want my voice to be part of what's training it. I'm not naive. In the world that we live in, there's very little information that's really private anymore. You just need to open a newspaper on any given day to figure that one out. But for me, when I'm working with AI, not only am I thinking about the benefits that it's giving to me, I'm often wondering, how is my one little conversation helping to shape the larger thing, right? And that's really important for us. If you really want to be the part of the dialogue and the shaping of the future of AI, you kind of need to engage with it. And that's the way that I think about it, you know? And so as I work with it, I think about how can it help me shape my ideas? How can it make those things more digestible? And how can I make it digestible to people who are unlike myself? If I walk into a room of people who are, human centric, glue work loving, invisible work celebrating folks, we could talk all day long. And that's wonderful. Um, but we're not the people in power. We're not the ones who are shaping the conversations. For me, how I know I'll make the most impact in the world is if I can communicate in a way that the voices that are not like my own can hear what I have to say. How can I talk about things and talk about, let's say, the invisible work in a way that they can understand it and they can appreciate it and they can understand the value of it and why they should care about it? Working with something like AI, which has been trained with those other voices in large part, not necessarily mine. Um, it helps me to speak to broader audiences about that human centric stuff that I love so dearly. It helps me, I get to say, here's my thinking. How would it resonate for this kind of person? Hey, how would it resonate for that kind of person? It gives me far more perspective than I would ever have, even if I was working with a team of humans, right? And it also does one more thing. If you are somebody who is not part of the dominant group, you recognize how much the world expects you to show up with all your T's crossed, all your I's dotted, look like you've got an entire team running behind you, making sure that you're posting blogs regularly, making sure that you have show notes, making sure that you're on social media, making sure that you're doing all these things that look like have the equivalency of what a corporation might have, and if you don't have that, sadly, they don't often take you seriously. So to be able to keep up with that scale, having tools is really important. So, you know, it's impossible to work at that scale without help. It's impossible to work at that scale with and have polish without help, And I do daydream about the day when I will have a team, but then even so, I bet you will still be using the tools because that's the world that we're living in. And, for me, as long as I'm being thoughtful about what I'm using AI for, as long as I'm being clear about what I'm receiving from AI, how I'm intaking the feedback that it has to have, or the revisions that it shows to me, or the turns of phrase that it wants to give me, or whether or not it uses an M dash. My goodness, how one piece of punctuation has polarized us. I haven't seen anything polarize us that much since the ellipsis. How everyone is criticizing older generations for using ellipses. I do love an ellipsis. But I think that if you use it well, you won't lose your humanity. What you will do is you will gain a broader perspective and a broader point of view that allows you to not work faster for faster's sake. Like, that's not the fun part. What it does is it helps you make at least for me, it helps me make my work more visible. It helps me make my work more available, more accessible, and it allows me to participate in forums and in conversations that I wouldn't be able to if I just tried to muscle my way through it, trying to develop skills that were never going to be my strengths. And it helps me be part of shaping a world that has been dominated by systems and tools and, organizations and all of the above that are failing us, and it's time for us to be part of the change that replaces them. So, the question that I leave you all with is, how are you choosing to show up in the systems around you? And how are you making sure that your humanity shapes the tools? The tools don't get to shape you. How are you making sure that your humanity shapes the tools that you use, that we all use? So, for me, it's about human agency, clarity, dignity, and making sure that we're helping to shape a world that's shaped by the systems that are imperfect. See you all next time when we cover another topic from the messy middle. Bye.
Thanks for taking time with us in the messy middle. Word of mouth remains the most powerful way for people to find us. If this episode sparked something for you, we'd love it if you'd subscribe to the podcast on your favorite app, download a few episodes, and share it with someone else who's navigating the in between. Do you have ideas for future episodes or topics you'd like us to explore? You can find our feedback form at themessymiddlematters.com or in the show notes. Thank you for joining us on this journey. This work is better when we do it together. Until next time.